Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video, and in this video I'm going to be doing my final trait tier list. This is going to be the tough tier list. If you haven't checked out the other traits, there should be a link to a playlist in the top right hand corner just linking you to all the other videos. I'm going to be doing these progressively every month. There should be another one next week because right now the trait ones did not include characters that were released in August. And, you know, early next week I'll do one with all the August characters being added to this list. I'll obviously collate all those lists together. A lot of work. You see, there's a lot of tough characters to get through here. I believe there's somewhere in the region of 39. I think it's 39 or 37. I'm not sure. But we're going to get through them. First one is going to be Sadiq. I'd say Sadiq is a very good character when it comes to world map progression. I think early on in the game, he was one of the best characters in the game. He was like S tier potentially, but I'd say he's been dropped down to B tier where he's still got a lot of use. Basically, he can still be used on world map, road maps, SR, that sort of thing. I don't think he can be really used in raids at all. Unfortunately, never really got a real go of it in raids and war and stuff, except extremely early on. Next up, we have John, and I put John down in probably like C tier. This is like on the edge of D tier, honestly. The same can be said for Sheldon for the same reasons. These guys never really got used as characters. They just mainly always fodder. But I don't really realistically think they should be. Their kits are okay. I think they could probably have like gold mythic replicas made of them. Just a bit more buffed out kits. It isn't that their kits are bad. It's just that they're silvers. That's pretty much it. It's not like their kits don't work. Next up is Yumiko, and I'm going to put Yumiko in high A tier, well, high B tier, sorry, and low A tier. I think there was some times where she could have potentially been useful, but she was one of the hardest characters to come by at the beginning of the Mythic era, and because of that, you know, people didn't really get a good chance to, you know, use her, unfortunately, and that's just the way it goes. Next up, we have Rosita. And I did use Rosita quite a lot on the early versions of Conquest, so I know she can still be used, but there are definitely better options out there, you know, for what she can bring to the table, which is control, mainly stun, more consistent options. So really, not really a great character like now. Still reliable in certain scenarios, challenge run, Conquest being pretty much it. Next up we have Princess, and I probably put Princess in very low A tier. She is a character that used to be really high up. Good damage dealer, good on road maps, can still potentially be used in certain attack teams, but there are better multi-hit tough characters out there. Obviously, she can hold a rampage weapon, so she can multi-hit quite a lot. The downside on her rushes is completely random. And against walkers, the way it normally works on like road maps is you would focus the enemies that are closest to you. So if there are any walkers like right next to your teammates, you'll take them out first, but because her rush is completely random, she can just attack people like way away, so there can be downsides to it, of course. Herschel, I'm going to put down into the D tier, because honestly, Herschel was terrible. It was a terrible character. He has like a turn 4 signature move, so really slow. He only got like good levels of healing when he got to LB3, but it still was extremely slow. He needed like -1 to starting cooldown twice at least on those limit break upgrades, and he just didn't get it. So, you know, unfortunately, that's the way it goes for Herschel. As generally, it was going to be a D tier of every trait. It's just how it is. Harlan's going to be in C tier. He did get an early go of it in the Mythic era. Reasonably tanky, harder characters to come by. Most people only had one copy. If he had a revive tacked onto his kit somewhere, I think he would be maybe pushed up to the B tier, maybe even low A tier, as just like a functional defense team character that potentially could be used. Now, Frost, I would say once upon a time was like maybe like S tier. He was very tanky, but then he fell off really quickly. Once more characters started coming out, his tankiness wasn't as a problem. He can still be used on road maps and challenge run. He does main damage, pretty useful. So I think Frost isn't like a terrible character, just kind of has niche usage, unfortunately, at the moment. When we come to Andrea, I'd say she's low A tier. I think she has the potential to have a comeback, though, because we are seeing a lot more alert characters out there. I'm just not sure if she hits hard enough. She is a little bit slow, even though she has the potential to rush again after taking someone out. It's not a guarantee. She's got not the old version of follow-up, not the new version of follow-up, which would obviously be a lot better for sure. Next up, we have Alice, who I'm going to put in high B tier. Now, I think Alice, once upon a time, was a solid leader. I think she probably was like a high A tier leader. She had some nice stuff where when she rushed, she buffed other people. You know, you rush with her first on an attack team as the leader. She gives attack to adjacent characters. It's actually not too bad at all. Next up we have Abraham, and I'd say he was mainly like a low A tier character, but he's been pushed down due to other characters' releases since. He pretty much was just a specialist skill, unfortunately. It is a nice specialist skill. One of his passives is actually not too bad, but his signature is too slow, and it just like deals AoE damage, and he can't like do his specialist skill on his own rush, so it wasn't that great, honestly. Mirabelle, I'd still say, is a pretty solid A tier character. If you can get her to work correctly, her defense down is really nice. Pretty much every game mode she's going to be usable because she's a Guardian Shield, one of the better specialists in the game in terms of just like long-time usability. Next up is Razzo, and I think he's kind of like a sneaky pick. Low A tier character, definitely the upgrade version of Rosita. Once I got my hands on this guy, he was definitely in those teams where I was using Rosita before. Conquest, he's great. Has that signature move that pops off quite a lot. Lots of control. He potentially can have some usage on a defense team. The issue he's got is the majority of leaders right now are HP leaders. He is a defense bonus character. Like, he gets bonuses from defense rating, and he's not getting any like huge amounts of defense rating at the moment. So that's just the way it is. You can team him up with Andre to change things a little bit, but there are generally just better options. So I'd say he's like low tier A for like war and raid defenses, that sort of thing. But he's being carried into A tier based on pretty much the rest of the game. We have Aiko, who never really hit the spot in my opinion. I'm going to put a very low B tier. She can do actually pretty reasonable damage, but as a leader, she wasn't that great. I think she gives some weird bonuses to survivors. It's like crit bonus or something like that on her lead skill. Usable, I guess, against those difficult walker maps, when you had to use a particular allegiance. That was pretty much the main uses I ever got of her, and I've had for like, nearly a year. So, yeah, that's just the way it is. Ty, I think, has gone up and down. I think there was a time when Ty was like S+. Then I think he went down to B, because obviously there was a big time when Burn was useless. And now it's kind of got a little bit more balanced, just because there are less of these Burn and Bleed resistance characters out there. So it's a little bit more usability. It is hard to get enough, on that Burn and Bleed situation to actually be effective, because these teams have such high HP, easy heals, cleanses, this sort of thing. So, and the resists out there, if they even add them, but the resist it basically makes it a yes-no situation on a Burn and a Bleed. It's kind of rough. Next up is Ash, and I'd say Ash is okay, but she's kind of just got better characters. There are a lot of damage dealers within Tough, honestly. They don't have the support damage that a lot of other traits do, so if there was a support damage dealer, it would be a bit better, but that's kind of a different story. Ash herself never really hit the mark. I think because she was a promo character, I think a lot of people didn't go for her over Princess, just because Princess hit more times. I think it's pretty much as simple as that. But she was a decap. If she had slightly better attack balance, she could be used even now. But her attack stat isn't like the highest. Uncle Sam is a weird one. I'd say he's probably like low A tier, but this is mainly because of the existence of characters like Andre. He did fall off quite heavily, basically with the release of Lydia. But when Andre came out, he had a bit more potential to be used in teams. You can bypass him quite easily with focus, but there are a lot of punishing characters now that if you get focus, you can get debuffs, that sort of thing. Next up is Cliff, and I'd say Cliff is a pretty solid bodyguard character. He is pretty much doing exactly what a bodyguard should do. He's going to be quite defensive. He's going to heal himself quite heavily as well. He's got like a very similar to Rush to someone like Angel. So, quite tanky if it goes off. Once it goes off, it's a problem. If you face him in Challenge Run, Conquest, it's tough. He is a little bit easier to, take down again. A lot of these tough defense team characters do rely on the fact that Andre exists. But I think he's actually pretty decent. If he has heavy bonus HP and with the existence of, new leaders coming up, we can have tough and alert teams together. He could potentially be used as a bodyguard on some of those teams. Now, the next one is Laurie 2000. And I'm going to put her down in C tier. She has decent parts of her kit, but it was never really that good in terms of what was needed in the game. Neutralize was actually good. She had some other parts of her kit which were control. She had damage, but she just didn't have what was required. And I think she just kind of looked cool. She was the free-to-play event character, or one of the free-to-play event characters, as part of the Skybound X Mythic trial. But she was very bad compared to the rest of the Skybound X characters, except Governor. Governor is definitely worse. Next up we have Conrad. And I'm going to put him in low A tier because I still think he has potential. I've used him quite a bit as not even a leader. He has really nice counter capabilities against Angel, and that means other characters too. You know, he can't remove buffs, and there's a lot of like people who give themselves Halo, decap resistance, stuff like this, and he can remove that. It's just about using him in a potential team. You're trying to set up. He's got to take the place of someone else, and there are generally better characters out there. But if you don't have those characters, Conrad still isn't bad, and he's a pretty decent leader. Gives yourself some survivability. Pretty decent in other game modes too. If you want to get things rolling in terms of doing things with damage, you know, you could go in on challenge run conquest like that, and it wouldn't be too bad. Andrew 2000, kind of similar to Ty, up and down. I think when she was probably first released, she was like high S tier. She was really nice. Then she dropped down to probably B tier again, and then now she's up into low A tier just because of the fact that, you know, Burn and Bleed have made a comeback. She has actually got a really cool design. It's just a shame that her decap potential isn't like a bit more consistent. You know, I don't know how they can make it more consistent, but I can hit someone with my rush and not get the crosshairs on there, so it's just the way it is. Davey, I'm going to still put into low S tier just because his special skill is really powerful. The difference between him and Noor is very self-sufficient. Davey needs other characters to make it work to the same sort of standard, or it won't even ever work to the same sort of standard really, but like to make it work to a decent standard. But because we need 15 characters on our main defense teams and a tower team, Davey's definitely still a top tier character. If we only need one defense team, probably not. He'd probably fall off a little bit just because Noor is a lot better, but he definitely has decent team up capabilities. Other tough characters, Andre, and speaking of the devil, Andre, I'd say Andre is probably a very high S tier, or almost S plus tier. Basically, he is really good in basically keeping other characters alive. If you hit him with a big attack on the rush, and it does proc his special skill, which is Payback, it will revive a teammate as well, very problematic. If he gets revived like by a weapon like Vance, and then you hit him by accident on a multi-hit rush afterwards, he will then revive someone and obviously do Payback. Now, there are obviously some counters to Payback now, in terms of like stopping that damage from being a problem, but the revives are always there. It's just annoying, making, you know, teams more tanky, and pretty much in everyone's defense team who's got him at LB3, one of their 3 or 4 defense teams for sure. Next up is Eva, and I think she's probably dropped down to like high A tier now, just because her damage has kind of like fallen off a little bit. She can still nuke a leader if you can get some defense down on that leader as well. Potentially you could take out multiple characters, but she's not very good with bonus HP. You know, it's 100,000 HP is hard. 200,000 is, you know, not. It's just crazy. It's just crazy, and especially considering the way her special skill works. If she takes out a character, it passes on damage to the next character because of waste not. But if they've all got bonus HP, it's just not really doing enough. Even if she does manage to take out somebody, it's not really taking out the 2 that she used to be able to do. She used to be able to take out 2 and absolutely wreak havoc, but it's not really there as much. She has some decent usability in other parts of the game. I use her quite a lot in arenas, just because her signature move is nice. It steals buffs as well, so you can use it against particular, you know, characters if you have problems there. Vance is going to be a very, very high A tier, but he has got some counters in the game. I mean, I'd probably put him sooner at lower S tier. I mean, I'll put him at S tier still, just because there's a lot of A tier characters here, and he's very low S tier, very high A tier. It's like kind of in the middle. There are counters out there. He isn't as problematic as he used to be. You know, there are a lot more decaps in the game, but he's a distraction. If he's in the team, you've got to really think about how to approach the team, regardless of what the other characters in that defense team are. If the other characters in that defense team are also problematic, then Vance is just kind of annoying. Like, I've seen Noor and Vance teams more recently, and because obviously you've got to focus on Noor to make sure she doesn't go too crazy, Vance just gets a little bit of freedom. And that's what you don't want, because when you attack Vance with that, after that taunt on the initial first turn, he heals people, and he could heal Noor anyway, and it procs the special skill. Yeah, not very nice at all. Next up is Ty, and I'm going to put Ty in a low B tier. Ty never really got a fair crack at the whip, in my opinion. He pretty much has a very, very identical kit to a very good character, and it was Lydia. he didn't really get a good go of it because he just kind of was goofy looking, I think, because it was like the turkey hunter. But he also didn't have like the damage roll, so the damage which kind of fell off a little bit. His stats were pretty much the same as Lydia, I think, so it wasn't too crazy, but I think people just kind of saw neutralize and just said no. I did gear him out and did test him out a bit, but I didn't really use him to high standard because that's when alert characters weren't really as big a thing. Now they are. He's not going to be very useful against them, unfortunately. That's just the way he is. If you can get him to rush early and things like challenge run, lots of control there. That is going to be decent for you. Next up is Gregory Grouch, and he's a disarm, but not a great one. I'm going to put him in B tier. I don't think he was really that great upon release. He has an interesting weapon, but it just isn't good. He's got maim and stuff like that, and hard to come by upgrades, but upgrades that people aren't even trying for realistically. So, that's the way it is. Next up, we're going to go for Trader, and once upon a time, I'd say Trader was definitely S+, without a doubt. I'd say he's dropped down to high S. I'd say he's still a very good character. I think it's more the fact that the characters that he enabled are less powerful now. So, for instance, Titan used to be really powerful, but now he's not as powerful. But me personally, I use Titan as a support character because of his normalize, not as like a huge damage dealer. I see him as like a backup damage dealer. Whereas when Titan was the main dude, Trader was obviously really important to make that happen. So it's not as problematic nowadays. But he's still very powerful, confused for the end of combat, stuns on the beginning of every turn if you want that to actually happen. So yeah, that's actually pretty good. Now we have Angel, and I say Angel was probably S+ tier for like 2 weeks, maybe like 2 wars. Then she was S tier, and then she is where she is now, which is probably high A tier, where if you don't go in with the right team, it can be impossible to kill her. But there are a lot of options to kill her now. A lot of people worked out how to deal with it. There's a lot more people going for things like ransack weapons. There was the option to pick a ransack weapon up in the past, and that is very problematic for Angel. She needs those buffs. If she doesn't have those buffs, much easier to take out for sure. Next up, we have St. Paddy's Prayer, and I think we're going to go into the next row on the A tier. And I'd say she is a pretty good leader. She does enable some really good, tough characters to, synergize quite well together. But I think as an individual character, I haven't had too much problems with her individually. Her cleanse is the only thing on her kit, which is just like, yikes. That's it. The stat boost is nice. The rush is obviously a revive, but it rarely goes off. It's not much of a problem. It's mainly the cleanse if you do want to attack a team in a particular way. Like if you normalize too early, don't control prayer, she can obviously just cleanse that normalize, and that's a problem for you. But that's pretty much it. Leader, cleanse, not much else. But she's still pretty good just because, like I say, she synergizes a lot of those S tier characters together. You can put like, Davey, Andre, Vance behind a Priya, and it's a decent team. It's going to be at least slow teams down by a little bit. It's just a normal kind of makeup. We're going to have to scroll down now. What characters we've got next? We've got Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones probably goes in low A tier. He, I think, is kind of needed on those St. Paddy Prayer teams to a certain extent. I think they kind of need a burn bleed resist because I can still go in against those teams and just wreak havoc. So it is just the way it is. I'd say they're kind of on the same paring. Mr. Jones, if his infection does go off early, it can actually be problematic for your team if you don't have a healer. Some people don't attack with a healer, heavy damage dealer teams. Then you can lose a character very early on in the fight. And if it's a significant character like someone who would normally do a normalized turn 2 or something like this, then yeah, you're in a lot of trouble for sure. Next up is going to be East Eva, and she is definitely an S tier character without a doubt. Heavy damage dealer. Really good, can take out those tanks, and she's really nice. I really like East Eva, and as a free-to-play character, you definitely need free-to-play damage dealers. You need to have free-to-play damage dealers. There aren't too many good ones. East Eva is one of them, and that's why she's in S tier. She's kind of like the new age Lydia, where she's kind of vital against certain teams, for sure. Now, one of the characters that she can counter to a certain extent if you have the right setup is going to be Peacekeeper. As much as he's countered quite a lot, he's still such an issue. I'm definitely going to be putting him up in the S+ tier, as you can see, just because he is going to be an issue with any team you face. He's kind of like Vance, where if he's in the team, you've got to think a certain way. You've got to also approach it with a very particular team and very particular characters, which overall does weaken your attack potential, but it specializes it. And there's going to be newer teams that come out which spread you quite thinly on attack, because you're thinking about Peacekeeper, but then there's also going to be Nora on that team, potentially like Vance as well. So there's so many characters you've got to think about at the same time. One of them is going to get through, and I think Peacekeeper is one of the ones that will get a bit of freedom in those ones. So still S+ tier. I'd say he is probably lower S+ tier now than he was before. There was a time when he was like, if it existed on my scale, it was like S++. He was like above the rim, not very balanced at all at one point. Next up we have Lily, and I'd say she's quite low S tier. She has really good potential, but her biggest issue here is that hitting crits is extremely vital for her, and if she gets controlled by a weapon, it just stops everything. It's just as simple as that. She is better than Princess without a doubt. She's a better version of Princess. Really good on roadmaps. Absolutely just destroys roadmaps. Really good. The top tier character when it comes to taking towers as well. So that's why she's in S tier still. I probably would put her in A tier if she wasn't that good on towers, or she wasn't very good on roadmaps. As like a raid attack team character, she needs the support to be pushed back up into S. But overall, I'd put her there just because of the other things that I just mentioned. Next up, we have Lee, Telltale character. I was very happy when he came out, but as a character, he doesn't really, do much as much as he is a command. Command isn't that spectacular. He's more of an offensive command. Attack team commands just aren't doing it for whatever reason. I think it's because of the signature move power or just the usage and the fact that you can't really rush super quick unless you've got like a really unbalanced setup, and it just doesn't work against a lot of teams. So a lot of the time it's better to stack characters rather than like certain support characters like commands, unless they're actually doing something themselves. If they had a command that kind of worked like Mike, maybe a different story. But as Lee stands, very low A tier. His kit is okay. If you want to use a command, he is one of the few that are available. For an attack team, he is probably the best. The other option right now is Rick 2000, but I'd say for sure Lee is the better attack team option. Next up we have Sheldon, and I'd say he's pretty reasonably heavy in A tier, kind of the reason like Ty and Andrew 2000 are here, but Sheldon mainly gets a lot of burn off a little bit later in the fight because it's quite heavily attached to his rush, but that's absolutely fine because there are some characters out there that only deal out resistances for the first couple of turns, like Wang First. So, he's basically a counter to Wang Fir defense teams who think they're safe, but they're not. A little bit slow maybe when it comes to attacking in that case, because you're not going to be getting that burn off as quickly. It takes turns for that burn to actually be effective as well. So, but you could potentially hit the auto button just because burn is, like I say, that powerful. But definitely not as bad as seemingly people think he is. I think his burn is actually really, really powerful for sure. Next up we have Ajax, and Ajax I'm going to put it up into the low S tier just in terms of what his kit brings to the table. He, as a character, like rush and signature move is like okay-ish, but it's mainly his specialist skill and how important that is in terms of how you can set up your team to just take out particular characters, particularly characters in Nor teams, just because they have so much bonus HP. And I did learn recently that his precision passive does actually reduce the crit resistance on characters, whether they have it as a buff from, a passive or a skill or a leader skill. So let's say someone has a 40%, which a tank has, they will not be able to stop this guy from critting if he actually hits the crit. They will not be able to resist it. So that's really important when it comes to his specialist skill. The last character on here is going to be Mateo. And I'd say Mateo is probably like really high B tier. He's a really, really solid character at B tier. Unless Trauma becomes a bit more usable, he's pretty much going to stay down here. I don't think he's like that amazing, just because Trauma doesn't really get going. There's not enough characters to really get it going. They need to create a character that has the kind of Diego setup where it removes the buffs manually. That way you can enforce the proc of Trauma, and then potentially Mateo would get more powerful. But until that happens, it's it's not really going to be a thing. If, let's say, resilient characters couldn't resist trauma, then maybe it'd be a reasonable counter against some resilient characters, but they can resist it, so, you know, it's not as powerful as it potentially could have been. So that's it for this tier list, guys. As you can see, my D tier character is Herschel, and then the rest above, C, B, A, and S+. We do have that singular S+ tier character. Do give me your thoughts on my tier list. Have you got any characters that you would list slightly differently? Are you using any of these characters to a good effect? Let me know in the comments down below. You know how it goes. That is it in my video. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.